What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Sound Check. It is your boys, Blake and TK, and we're here with another top 5 video for you, another podcast-style video. We hope you guys enjoyed the top 5 front people. Today, we're going to do our top 5 albums. So, Blakey boy, how'd you find the process for this one, man?
This one was actually pretty easy compared to the last one.
Yeah.
But as we both agreed, it would be impossible to rank these.
Yes.
So these aren't going to be ranked.
No, these are just the 5 albums that we've put on our list in no order. So, All right, let's get into it, bro. What is your first album?
I'm going to just, off the top of my head, I'm going to go with, it's an album by a rap group.
Yes.
Called Brockhampton.
Yes.
They're definitely one of my favorite artists of all time.
Yeah.
So something for them had to kind of go in this list.
Which album made it, bro?
Saturation 2. It's from a trilogy. There's 3 albums. They're all recorded in the space of a year.
Yeah.
Which is
I think they put them out within
crazy.
7 months. 3
bro.
projects, which is insane.
Yeah.
All right. And why Saturation 2?
It's just the one that resonated most with me.
Yeah.
I discovered Brockhampton in 2018.
Yeah.
Which I would argue is when that was like their prime. That was their peak.
Yeah.
And I discovered them through album Iridescence.
Yep.
And honestly, I loved Iridescence so much, but there was something that about, I think, I don't know if you know how the album was recorded, right?
No.
So all of Saturation Trilogy was recorded in a house, okay? And essentially, like, they just were living in a house, writing, recording all hours of the night. And I think that like life that they were living, it's just injected into the heart and the soul of the album.
Yeah,
the
nice.
albums. So I'd say the main reason why number 2 is just when I was looking back at the trilogy, because I could easily just be like, yeah, the trilogy, but I wanted to be specific. Saturation 2 is the one that I definitely just would put on repeat the most in 2018 when I was at work all day. And just going back and listening to the album every time just reminds me of all the good times from that period of my life. Which is awesome. Like, it's so sick when you can actually
associate an album to a period in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfect, man.
That's why I had to pick it, man.
Yeah. Sick, man.
Yeah, it was
All
good.
right. Well, my first one is going to be Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine.
Nice.
And I had a hard time kind of narrowing down which Rage album. I had to put a Rage album on there. They're my favorite band. So I went with Evil Empire because as much as I love the first album, the self-titled album, Evil Empire is like the angrier, more dark, aggressive older brother of the debut. And it moved away from like that kind of like early hip hop and early metal influences into like more experimental hip hop and like darker, more raw forms of metal.
Yeah.
And I just love it, man. It's always an album that I come back to. Lyrically, it's like dealing with... So the first album deals with like mainly like American issues.
Right, okay.
Whereas this album sort of starts to deal with like more worldwide, universal issues that kind of everyone outside of America can relate to as well.
Yeah.
It's raw. I love it when like a band blows up off their first album and instead of like leaning into that and going more mainstream, they're like, F that, let's go way more dark and raw.
Yeah.
And there's just songs that I always come back to. I think it's when they like perfected their craft.
Sick. Okay.
In my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to disagree with that, but that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, man. And it's just an album that I think really kind of captures the feeling of that time in history.
Yeah.
And like you said, similar to you, it sort of, I associate it with a time in my life as well. Probably around like 2013, 2012 is when I really frothed on that album.
That's cool.
And it was like in my early 20s. It was a good time. And yeah, man, it's my favorite Rage album probably. So that's why I went with Evil Empire, bro.
That's awesome, man. No, that's really cool. What can you kind of associate to that album? Because the first thing that I'm thinking of is like in terms of like media and stuff like that. Because Rage Against the Machine are massive, huge group.
Yeah.
All I can think about when I think of Rage Against the Machine is people covering it at metal and hardcore and punk shows, or rock shows, and Guitar Hero.
Yeah, 100%. A major thing that I associate, because it is around the time that I got into them, was I actually went to a hardcore show.
Yeah.
And do you remember the band The Warriors?
Yeah.
They toured with Parkway.
Yeah.
And they covered Bulls on Parade. And I was like frothing, man, because at that
Sick.
time, like, I didn't know people who really frothed Rage, like, because we were so kind of entrenched in the hardcore scene.
Yeah.
And I just remember the place exploding, bro. And that's when I was like, okay, like, Rage, like, they transcend their genre, and they, like, everyone can resonate with that band. And
fully.
Especially that song. Like, I've never heard anyone, like, get disappointed when Bulls on Parade comes on, man. People are just like,
that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who's covering it, people get so G'd up.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, it's just one of those universal tracks that hip-hop fans, metal fans, rock fans, dance music fans, everyone's just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
dog.
Yeah,
That's
timeless,
so true,
timeless album for me, man. Yeah.
Hell yeah, bro. That's awesome, man.
All right, Blake, what's your next album on the list, bro? I'm keen to hear it.
All right, my next one, it's a ridiculously heavy album. It's nothing like the last one.
Wouldn't be a Blake top 5 without some absolute chaos. So let's go. What is it?
That's what we're here for. This is Wormwood by I'm going to start again. It's by a band called the Acacia Strain, and the album's called Wormwood.
Yep.
It still holds up.
Yep.
People that froth like heavy metalcore and breakdowns still swear by this album.
Yeah.
It came out in like, I think, I should know. It came 2009 or 2010.
I think that's right. Yep.
And man, it shreds. The production on it shreds. The writing on it shreds. It's catchy, which is like, it's really interesting because it's like singing about the end of the world and how bad the world is.
Yeah.
But it's really catchy. Like the lyrics use a lot of rhyming. And overall, man, it's just a mean album.
Super influential too, right?
Like, really influential, bro. So like, it was just before Gent blew up.
Yep.
But it was using a combination of like metalcore and Gent to come together to bring this like brand new flavor, but it was so angry and menacing.
Yeah.
And that was like what followed from that was like a lot of like angry Gent bands, like moshy Gent bands. And to me, that's when Gent was its coolest. That died off pretty quick. And then I think the influence of Gent's kind of still stuck around with those heavy bands. But dude, overall, man, it's a crushing album. There's not a bad, like, there's not 1 second on it that sounds bad. No skips. I even got it tattooed on myself.
Yes.
That's how much I love the album, and like I wouldn't do that if I didn't back the album.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point saying that it's like angry Gent, because like Gent itself kind of like comes from Meshuggah, right? That's like the band that sort of inspired the genre.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these like melodic Gent bands came around, and like Meshuggah are not melodic, bro.
No.
They are crushing.
Yeah.
And so Acacia Strain were like the first band to like bring in that like Meshuggah influence and keep the like raw energy and brutality of Meshuggah, which is sick.
100%. If you listen to Wormwood and then you go listen to Meshuggah and then Pantera, you'll be like, whoa,
that's
like,
Wormwood.
Like if I had to describe Wormwood to someone who'd never heard the Acacia Strain before and didn't know breakdowns of metalcore, it's Pantera meets Meshuggah with like Terror influence.
Yeah.
It's like those three combined, and that's like the perfect way to put it together. Vincent's just got like a one-of-a-kind voice, and he influenced me quite heavily, and he influenced a generation, but can't be imitated.
Would you say that that's his like best vocal performance on Wormwood?
Potentially. I really like, this is the thing. I think almost every album he's kind of slightly changed things up. It's definitely up there. But I don't really think that like the vocal performance overall is what like is a standout for me. I think it's just the whole package.
Yeah. Well said, man.
But like his voice, definitely you saw it go to a different level at that point.
Yeah.
I think like my favorite vocal performance from him is probably from like the album that came after it, Death is the Only Mortal. Mm-hmm. Just because he just went to a whole new level that no one was doing. And I haven't heard anyone do anything like it since.
Yeah.
It's like, it almost feels like he's pig squealing, but he's not.
Yeah.
And like, he just has such a cool ability to like, just sound like a freaking demon.
Yeah. Well, I think like you said, man, the total package of Wormwood is what draws you to it. And I think for anyone's favorite album, it can't be one thing. It has to be the entire package.
Whole package,
So,
man. It's really cool.
Awesome,
What about you,
man.
my dude?
All right, my number 4, or not number 4 in order, but my next album
Watch yourself, dog.
is The Great Southern Trendkill by Pantera.
There we go.
And this one, again, man, Pantera and Rage are like, they've got so many classic albums that it's impossible to narrow it down to one. But if I had to pick one, it's going to be The Great Southern Trendkill.
Why?
It is heavy and brutal. It's extreme. Like, if you don't like extreme metal, you're not going to like this album because it is just utter chaos, man. Again, lyrically, I think it's by far the best Pantera album.
Yeah.
It's full of like just disdain and desperation, and in the vocals, you can hear like a lot of metal singers sound like they're going through it, you know, like there's anguish and there's just sorrow and anger and everything.
He's just pissed at the world.
But it's real on this album.
Yeah.
Phil was in the middle of a heroin abyss at the time. His life was falling to pieces. And so when you hear that anger and you hear that anguish, you're like, that is like so authentic because that dude is going through it right now.
It's real.
Yeah, it's real as it gets, man.
Dog.
As real as it gets. And I think he went to rehab like 3 months after. So that shows like how effed he was at that time.
And it's such a different time because, you know, when we were going through high school, man, it was drilled into us to like stay away from these substances. If you touch them, your life's over. Whereas like a dude like him, he didn't have that. So he's just like, he's dealing with it in his own way. And like, imagine what rehab was like back then.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy. And for him, it wasn't even like it almost wasn't a choice, man. It was a really bad situation. He broke his back, and like I broke my back too, so I know how screwed up it is. But he broke his back, and basically they were like, you need to have surgery and you're going to have to take like a year off touring. And he was like, I can't do that. Just give me some painkillers to get through it. And then painkillers
went from that to
led to heroin, and then his life's ruined. So it was a really sad story. But anyway, back to the album itself. As brutal and crushing as it is, there are these songs like Floods and like Suicide Note Part 1, which have these really beautiful, haunting melodies, and you get to hear that softer side of his voice.
Yeah.
And again, man, you just like hear the sorrow in his voice, and you're like, it hits deep, man, and it's resonated with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I just think overall as an album, it's just like a sonic assault, dude. One of the most sort of iconic guitar sounds.
Yep.
And the band around Phil, like Phil was falling apart, but the band around him were like the strongest they've ever been.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, at this point, they're so used to playing with each other. I mean, Vinny and Dime are brothers, so they've always played with each other. But as the three members of the band, so locked in.
Yeah.
It's so tight. And yeah, man, it's just an album that if you want to just burn the world down, listen to The Great Southern Trendkill.
That's a really good way to put it, my dude. Because I've definitely had those feelings when I've spun it myself. So.
Yeah, man. And another thing for me is like, I can hear, like, okay, obviously Pantera influenced a lot of bands. Like you were just talking about the Acacia Strain, heavily influenced by Pantera. Slipknot, Lamb of God, Hatebreed, all super influenced by Pantera. And while I'm sure they love Pantera's like whole discography, I hear The Great Southern Trendkill the most in their music. So influential doesn't even begin to describe this album. And yeah, man, that's my next album on the list.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Definitely an album before its time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well ahead of its time.
Yeah.
All right, so we're working through our lists. This is very fun. I'm enjoying this. We're learning a lot about each other.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive into my next album. So my next album is a bit of a weird one.
Okay.
A lot of people, such as yourself, when I say that this is one of my favorite albums, they don't understand why. And there's a very good reason why. So this album is called The Bees Made Honey in the Lion's Skull. It's by I'm just going to say it, they're a stoner rock group.
Yeah.
Been around forever. Once again, I have a tattoo of their album on me.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
I'm a very big fan. And it's just an album that I discovered before I actually discovered smoking. I think we can say smoking and that won't get us pulled off. And you guys can
vaguely remember, so this is going back to like 2011, 2012 when we first lived together.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember you listening to this album at the time. Is
Really?
that correct?
No. When we lived together in 20...
Yes. At Ashfield. Yes. Okay, yeah.
So I discovered it in like 2018.
Yeah.
So like I discovered it because Vincent from the Acacia Strain was going through like a divorce.
Yes.
And like he was all being like really emotional and like he was discovering his like emotional side on the internet.
Yeah.
And like he put up this post. He just put it on his story once. Like the album cover, and I was like, oh wow, that album looks cool, whatever. And then he posted again. He's like, I drove out into the highway tonight. I sat in my car and I watched the stars and I just listened to Earth all night.
Yes.
Find your happiness.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
I've heard the album, and that situation he described is the perfect way to listen to this album.
Fully, man, fully. So like I saw him write that and I was like, I gotta go check out this album. And I was going through a similar thing. I was going through a real major breakup at that time, and I wasn't smoking at that point in my life.
I can vouch for you. Definitely
like
weren't.
occasionally when I would maybe have one every 3 months with you, maybe. And Vincent he's straight edge. He's always been edge. He's never not been. He still is to this day. So I was like,
you don't need to smoke to listen to this album.
No, not at all. And like, there's plenty of times in my life where I've like enjoyed this album since I started smoking, and like I've really enjoyed it. But I think, you know, eventually as I just like developed like real bad anxiety in life, I naturally just like was drawn to smoking as like self-medication and whatnot. Yeah. And the two and two just go so well together. Yeah.
This album instrumental?
Completely instrumental, dude.
Okay.
So it's completely instrumental. And
again, that's something so different for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it actually started my love for instrumental music. Yeah. When like lo-fi became a huge thing, it was just a matter of time. Yeah. And I still to this day, I'm just obsessed with a lot of like weird like lo-fi and soul, instrumental music. Yeah. To the point where like when metalcore bands will release an instrumental album, I would much rather listen to that at any time than their actual album. Wow. Yeah, especially bands like Northlane. Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, great instrumentals,
so good. There's so much depth to the music. But yeah, overall, man, it's very spacey almost. But it like also like as well, like when I was experimenting with other like hallucinogenics, that's also where I really fell in love with this album. It paired up really well with it. And like a lot of the times when you're having those like experiences, like in those nights out, like the music, you can develop like a real deep love to the music. Yeah. Because of those things that you're doing.
It probably helps too because it's familiar, and when you're in this crazy circumstance, you can come back and center yourself to this album that you love so much.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, I could be wrong in saying this, but the vibe that I get from the whole concept of the album is that, like, no matter what happens, we're always going to return to the earth. That's
really cool.
Yeah, we are a part of Mother Nature. You know, the cycle will continue, will come and will go. New civilizations will form and all that sort of stuff. And
look, I think that's really cool because with an instrumental album with no lyrics, it's up to you to determine the meaning of the album. Yeah. You don't have lyrics that you can go, okay, this is what they're talking about on this song. It's music and you can make it whatever you want. So even if that wasn't their intention, for you to say that is completely valid, man, because it can be whatever you want it to be. And that's a really great thing to associate with it. It's really cool.
And for me, I think the way to describe the album is that it's a soundtrack to the beginning of time, and it's a soundtrack to the end of the world.
Wow, dude.
It's the kind of music. It's the kind of music that I'd imagine is playing in a movie when you see a scene where no human is left on Earth, and then we're trying to be reborn through the earth and the bacteria and whatever you want to call it. And like, that's my hippie side that comes out when I like put this album on. And yeah, man, still to this day, like occasionally here and there, I will, even when I'm not smoking, I'll just like have a listen to it in the shower. And it's peaceful music, and it really just like calms me.
Great choice.
That's why it can't not be a favorite album. And I'm dying to find it on vinyl and get a vinyl player and like experience it in that way one day. So,
Dope.
but enough about me, dog.
Dope.
I've been talking out my bum. What about you, brother?
All right, man. So my next one I'm going to go with is Run the Jewels RTJ2.
Alrighty.
And for me, bro, this is a perfect hip-hop album.
Yep.
If there was a 10 out of 10 in hip-hop, it is this album for me. The beats are harder than nails, bro. Like the craziest beats I've ever heard.
Very experimental that I noticed. It's not just like a melody looping.
No, dude.
And it's like...
No,
it's crazy.
No. It is crazy, dude. The production is insane. It sounds huge. The rapping, the wordplay is like two absolute masters of their craft coming together to make what I consider to be a masterpiece, which is probably a word I'm going to repeat a few times throughout this podcast. But to me, it's a masterpiece, dude. Lyrically, it's insane. Like, you want to talk about like quotable lines? Like almost every line on this album is quotable and memorable and gets stuck in your head. And the more you listen to it and you listen to the lyrics, you're just like, these guys are geniuses, man.
Right.
Like, they are just going off. Like,
so do they produce the beats themselves?
Yeah. So Run the Jewels is Killer Mike and LP. And LP is the producer and also the rapper.
Yep.
And he's an iconic producer, man. Like objectively, some of the best beats in hip hop have come from LP. And to me, this is them at their peak. Like, there are no skips on this album.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to listen to it from start to finish, I don't think there's a single point where you're like, okay, I need to move on to the next song. Like, they're non-stop killing. I can't remember how many features are on this album, but there's one that sticks out, obviously, for me, and that's Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine.
I didn't know that, man.
And when we did that top 5 front people video, and I mentioned that, like, he's kept up with music, him on this, dude, is insane.
Really?
Like, he absolutely murders his verse.
How long ago was he on that album? Sorry.
So this is like 2012, 2013.
So like
around
quite
that period.
Old in his career.
Yeah,
to be doing a guest spot.
Like 12 years since Rage put out an album. And so he sounds so fresh. The whole thing sounds so fresh. And today, man, it still sounds like if I put it on for someone who never heard it and told them it was released today, they'd 100% believe it.
God damn.
Yeah, man, just the atmosphere that it creates too, like, I can't even describe it. Like, you listen to this album and you can almost, like, feel what's happening. Like, the beat creates this vibe, and then the lyrics and the vocals create this vibe, and to me, it's an album that just makes you feel like a bad mother effer, dude. Like,
that's
you
sick.
walk down the street at night listening to that album, you're like,
just getting
I dare someone to mess with me, dude.
G'd up, man.
It's so sick, dude. And yeah, that's like, I don't know what else to say about it, man. To me, it's just as good as hip hop gets. Oh, one thing I will say. To me, this is the perfect hip-hop album to get a metalhead into hip-hop.
Wow.
Like, there's so many elements of metal in there. Like, not the sound, but the attitude, the aggression, the heaviness. Like, the beats are heavy, man. And, like, a couple of people, like JD from my band Bare Bones, he absolutely loves Run the Jewels.
Right.
And
do you think that they have a metal background in some way?
They do, man. They actually do. There's a video online of them talking about it.
Okay.
And they're like, Killer Mike, for example, is like the biggest Black Sabbath fan you'll ever meet, which is really cool because he's a OG rapper from Atlanta.
Yeah.
From the mud, dude. And he somehow in his youth discovered metal, which back then there was no internet, none of that kind of stuff. The last thing I'll say as well is it's so cool to me that these are dudes in their mid-40s at this point. They've had whole careers before Run the Jewels, and there's no like sounding like an out-of-touch old man. They are just on point, dude.
In the pocket, on the pulse.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that album, please go and listen to it.
I definitely need to give it a proper listen. I only really listen to the singles. I don't really know them all that well, so yeah, I'm gonna have to spin them.
Yeah.
You've sold me, dude.
Yeah, if you don't get into it, bro, we're not friends anymore. So just so you know. Nah, I'm kidding.
No, awesome, man. That's sick.
All right, bro. So we are more than halfway now.
Yeah.
We're up to album number 4.
Yeah.
What's your fourth?
And remember,
one?
it's not a ranking.
Yes.
We're not ranking things.
No,
here,
we're
baby.
not ranking them. It's just the fourth one in the list.
Fourth one on the list. All right, so I am just gonna chuck out because I want to kind of jumble it up from genres and sounds.
Cool.
This next one is probably the most like inspirational album it's had on me as a muso.
Yeah.
This is Relentless by a band called For the Fallen Dreams.
Yeah, an album that I very much associate with you.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
a lot of my friends do say that. I took a real like big like following to like the style, even the fashion of the vocalists around the time when I was growing up, trying to find my own sense of identity.
Yeah.
And these days, like don't really do a lot of that about anyone, but I think all of that kind of ties in together. I discovered the album like just after it came out in 2009.
2009. Okay.
Yeah,
Sick. Yeah.
2009 when it came out, and they had already had like a huge peak as a band from the previous album Changes, and obviously new album with a new vocalist.
Yeah.
Same producer, Joey Sturgis, and this album was like a metalcore defining album at the time as well as their previous one.
Yeah.
This is what kind of really put like the whole melodic metalcore thing on the map. And this band toured relentlessly. No pun intended.
Pun intended, yeah.
But I think overall, man, like I think it's just because I found it at that time in my life, and that's what like it's a quite nostalgic feeling album for me.
Yeah.
It's also really heavy, especially for its time. If you heard it now, you'd be like, this is weak. You would think it's weak, but it's for its time. It was really, really like it was on the mark. It was what was popular. It's what everyone was frothing. And I really do think it was a cut above everything that was out at that time as well, man.
I agree, man. Yeah, for sure.
They had a feature from Jeremy from A Day to Remember.
Yeah, I
and A Day to
remember
was
that. That song was
huge.
huge, dude.
Yeah,
That was a
dude.
huge deal.
Absolutely, man. So yeah, look, it's just the full package for me. Like it's what I associate to be top tier metalcore.
Yeah.
There's obviously lots of like new age bands that do that sound that I absolutely adore and froth as well.
But they wouldn't exist without this album.
Exactly. And so I think that's why it's so important. I always talk about this album to a lot of people that are like, have gotten into metalcore in the last couple of years. I think it's important to go back and listen to albums that inspired the bands that you listen to now.
Yeah. Being such an influential album on you, do you remember what you were listening to like before this came out?
So I would say around the time of it, well, actually, this is a funny thing. So like around the time it came out, I obviously listened to the album here and there a few times, but it didn't actually like, I wasn't like obsessed with it yet.
Yeah.
Okay. But I definitely appreciated it and loved it. At the time, I was listening to a ton of like deathcore.
Okay.
Suicide Silence, I Declare War.
Old Bring Me the Horizon.
Old Bring Me the Horizon. Heaps of like deathcore. I was obsessed with finding deathcore after deathcore after deathcore. And I think as I just kind of like left my, 16, 17-year-old years and I like left high school or whatever, I started listening to a lot more like metalcore, and I was less into I was becoming less into bands that just had played breakdowns and blast beats. I wanted a bit more.
You wanted some melody.
Some melody, but I wasn't necessarily looking for bands that just had like singing choruses and whatnot. No. But because I think what clung to me is like, I was like, well, my skill set at the time was I wanted to be a screened vocalist in a melodic metalcore band, and that's why I just attached to it so well. And so I really got obsessed with it, I would say, from like 2011, 2012.
Okay.
Is when I really became obsessed with that album. And yeah, man, I still revisit it all the time. And it, the production doesn't hold up as much as I would love it to. But the songs are still there, and the songs are never going to go away.
Still mean something to you.
They mean a lot to me. And once again, they're another band that I really struggle to pick a favorite from. I've got 2 favorite albums from that band, but this one by far had to go in my top 5.
Sick, man. Yeah. Again, wouldn't be a Blake top 5 without it. So
not at all.
I love it.
But
all right, cool.
What have you got for us, dude? This is your second last one. It's a big deal, baby.
Yeah,
what do you got,
bro? So my second last favorite album is Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf.
Huge album.
Huge album. And I'm going to make a huge call here. I think that this is the best modern rock album. So
whoa, that's a huge call.
Yeah, if you start from, say, the year 2000 up until now, and I'm pretty sure this came out in the year 2000. I could be wrong, might have been 01, but it was around that time. I just think it is the best modern rock album, man. I think it's an album that is timeless. I think in 30, 40, 50 years from now, people are still going to discover this album and be blown away by it. One of the things I really love is, to me, I mean, the concept of the album is you're driving from Los Angeles out to the desert to Joshua Tree.
Okay.
And you're listening to different radio stations as
I didn't know
you're on your
that.
journey. Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
so
Sorry, what's Joshua Tree for those who don't know? Because I actually don't know.
Joshua Tree is literally a tree, like this really famous tree out in the desert in California. If I showed you a picture after this, you'll be like, oh, I've seen that before.
Put it on screen as well.
Yeah. And it's this really iconic spot out in the Californian desert. Like a lot of tourists go there. And then also like people native to California really like resonate with it as being this like earthly iconic place that you just go out and experience. Like a lot of people do hallucinogenics out there, but you don't have to. Like it's just amazing. It's a dream of mine to go there. I've been to California, but I went to the wrong side of California, so I didn't get to see it. But that's the concept. And to me, it paints that picture. Like if you close your eyes and listen to that album, you imagine yourself driving through the desert in like a sick vintage car without a care in the world, dude.
Oh yeah, good feeling.
Yeah. And it's such a diverse album. They had 3 singers at the time, each with their own distinctive voice.
Is that the one that Dave's on?
Yes. And
Did
Dave
he
Grohl,
sing?
no, he didn't sing at all.
And they had 3 singers and no Dave singing.
Exactly. So I'll quickly jump to that. Dave Grohl's drum performance is iconic.
Yeah,
man.
it's so well known.
Yeah,
hey.
it's known throughout rock that is like one of the greatest drum performances.
I'm not even like super well familiar with the album. I know the hits. Yeah. But like I know full well that that's like an iconic moment in rock history where he drummed on that album.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to the 3 vocalists, all with these distinct personalities, and they all have completely different sounds for the songs that they're singing on. So you've got everything from like high energy screaming, almost like hardcore punk.
Wow.
Through to like slow stoner rock, through to these like
lots of groovy, funky bits too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's some like really eerie sort of spacey tracks as well. It's got something for everyone. Like if you dig rock, you'll love this album. One of the most iconic guitar sounds. Like guitarists have spent years trying to recreate the tone from Songs for the Deaf.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck.
And yeah, man, to me, it is just an iconic album. It's something that I don't think I'll ever get sick of. Some of the songs on it have been overplayed to death. Like if you've ever been to a pub that plays rock music, you're gonna hear No One Knows by Queens of the Stone Age.
Pizza.
Yes, absolutely. It's played at sports games, it's played everywhere, and I've never got sick of it, dude. It's like one of those radio tracks that a lot of people have gotten sick of. I still love it in the context of the album, especially where it falls in the album.
For sure.
Back to the concept of the album, the little radio skits that are throughout the album are iconic and so cool and give it that vibe. And yeah, man, to me, it's like a perfect rock album, and I love it.
Amazing,
so
dude. That's a really cool way to summarize that album.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, cool.
Sick, man.
All right, well, this has been a lot of fun, and I wish we could just talk about... we wish this list could be 5 million long.
Dude, 100%. I could do 100 of my favorite albums. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we've narrowed it to 5 because that's... Otherwise, this video would be 10 million... where's the camera? It'd be 10 million hours long. So we're rounding out our 5. And once again, no ranking. This is our last of the 5. Mine is an album. It's a really new album called Calico. It's by a solo artist named Ryan Beaty. And I knew well about Ryan Beaty for years, but you're actually the one that got me into the album.
I am, yes. We both love Brockhampton, and we've both talked about how we wish Ryan Beaty was in Brockhampton.
Yeah,
because
still don't get why he never joined.
Yeah, for those who don't know, he collaborated with them a lot and sung on a lot of their songs. And to me, those are the most memorable Brockhampton songs, are the songs with Ryan Beaty on them. So
they're definitely some of the most... Well, that Sugar song is by far their biggest biggest hit.
Amazing song. And
great song.
His voice on that is amazing. So yes, Brockhampton dissolves, and we're wondering what is Ryan Beaty going to do next. And I happened to see one day that he'd put out an album, and I was like, Blake needs to hear this album.
Yeah, man.
And obviously it had a huge impact on you.
Yeah, man. I knew Ryan Beaty. I listened to his 2020 album, and I obviously love a lot of the songs as Yon. There was a big part of me, like, for a while there was like, because he's not in the band, I'm like, I don't want to hear him on Brockhampton songs. I only want to hear who's on Brockhampton. I actually really don't like Brockhampton with guest spots. I don't know what it is, but it's almost maybe like because there's so much variety already. I'm like, I don't need any more. I want the guys that I love.
Yeah.
Because I love Brockhampton as a collective.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
a lot of the vocalists that I don't really like to listen to on their own. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's not about Brockhampton. It's about Ryan Beaty. So yeah, you got me onto this album, and I think at the time I was really going through a lot of hectic stuff where I was trying to stop smoking, really take a break, and I needed to listen to some very peaceful music and some very calming music. And I'm just going through this phase this last 12 months where I'm starting to realize and value more and more authentic music.
Yeah.
And this album's so authentic. Like his 2020 album, there's a lot of like digital production, and I'm sure this album's probably recorded on in Pro Tools or something. Of
course.
But what I mean by that is like there's real instruments. It's like there's really only real instruments in this.
Yeah.
And then he's done a couple of like live versions of the of the tracks, and it's the album but better.
Yeah.
Because it's because when you write real music with real instruments and then you play it live, it translates just effortlessly.
Yeah, man. I know what you're trying to say.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just works so well, and it like, and when you have someone as talented as him who can really use their voice, it's just beautiful. It's absolute magic, man.
That is the word that stuck in my mind when I think of this album. It's a beautiful album, man.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to listen to. It's beautifully written, beautifully performed.
Yeah.
It's a really special album, and released in a time where a lot of people don't care about that stuff, and he doesn't care that they don't care.
Yeah.
He just wanted to put out what he wanted to put out, and the result is beautiful, man. It's a
incredible,
really
man.
special album.
It's just like, it's just sets the tone for so many different moves and moments in my life. And my favorite time, some of my favorite times to listen to music is in the shower.
Yeah.
I'm not really a big, like, I only started driving a few years ago, and I'm not really a big fan of listening to music while I drive. I think because when I listen to music, I usually want to change the music pretty often. That's just how I am. I'll listen to an album, and then like halfway through, I'm like, oh, I want to listen to this album and that album and that album.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But when I'm driving, I can't do that. So I find myself pulling over and doing it, and not like illegally changing music.
Yeah, of course not. We'd never do that.
But obviously, like, fast forward a few months after discovering the album, I'd been spinning it very often. I took a bit of a, like you take a bit of a break. You're like, okay, I've smashed it enough.
I can name like 3 or 4 different situations that we've been in, and you've just put that album on.
There you go.
It's you're right. Late night, winding down after a party. This album's perfect.
Yeah.
Chilling in the back garden.
Yeah.
This album's perfect. Driving, perfect. Yeah.
Moment where, sorry to cut you off. The moment where I realized that this is one of my all-time favorite albums is, it was August of this year, and it was like spring, so it was like perfect weather, and I'm a videographer. I do a lot of weddings, so I'm up in the Hunter Valley, very nice countryside, peaceful part of the world. And I went and did the bride and groom's pre-ceremony up on a hill, up on a mountain. Finished that. That was beautiful. It was easy. And I had I had a cottage booked for myself.
Sick.
And I can just remember, I'm never going to forget this moment where I got into the car, I put it on the album, and I was like, oh, I've got like the whole afternoon and evening free. So I just drove around the Hunter Valley on the hills and the countryside, all the windows down. Sorry, Kayla, she's going to hate me. I cranked the volume as loud as I could in the car, and I'm just sitting there I push my seat back, my feet are just relaxed, and I'm just like driving, listening to this album, and I was like, yeah, this is my nothing matters in the world right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is incredible. And like, yeah, I'll never remember that trip because I was by myself, like just away, and yeah, man, it was incredible. And like, it's a perfect album for that.
That
for that
cemented
moment.
that as one of your faves. That's cool,
and
man.
yeah, like I think I'm never gonna stop loving that album. It's an album where I'm like, I can't wait till I have children one day where they're old enough to appreciate music, and I can sit them down and like show them an album like this, because I'm
special,
like,
man.
This is an album that will stand the test of time because it's so raw and authentic.
Yeah, awesome.
So
man.
that is all my albums in one shot.
All right,
what's
brother.
yours, my dude?
Mine is a album by a multi-instrumentalist, a prolific songwriter by the name of D'Angelo. And the
Okay.
album is called Voodoo.
Yep.
For me, man, this is some of the most incredible songs that have ever been made. Like it's some of the most beautiful music that's ever been recorded, in my opinion. It was created with some of the best players of their instruments. It is a ridiculous lineup of musicians that he got to support him. So from the drums, Questlove from The Roots plays the drums. You have Pino Palladino on bass, who played bass for people like Prince and many other iconic artists.
Yep.
And then D'Angelo is playing piano, guitar, singing. He's doing a bit of everything. And it's an album that really, to me, just like speaks to me really deeply.
Yeah.
And I'm just blown away by it every time I listen to it, man. I think that like it's infused with so many different genres. There's soul, there's hip hop, there's funk, there's blues, there's jazz, a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And the vibe of the album is incredible. The songs are masterful. To me, it is a flawless masterpiece, man.
Wow.
Like, I've seen that many reviews of this album where it's got...
And how old is it, sorry?
Came out in 2000, I believe. So some background on the album. D'Angelo released his first album in 1995, and he kind of like blew up off that album. And the way that he was marketed and stuff like kind of turned him into like a sex symbol sort of thing.
Well, that was the vibe that I got off the album cover.
Yeah, exactly. But he was totally against that. He's like a really introverted, introspective kind of guy. And so it took him a long time to create this next album. And he, as I was telling you before, so there was this collective of musicians at the time called the Soulquarians.
This story was amazing. Yeah, go on.
So the Soulquarians were D'Angelo, The Roots, Common, Erykah Badu, Mos Def, like a bunch of these sort of like prolific songwriters and people in music at the time.
Yeah. And
they all moved into Jimi Hendrix's Electric Lady Studios for like a period of 2 years. I think this album took 2 years to record.
Yeah.
And they were just all jamming, all working on each other's music and living together. And it was just this...
How did they come together, sorry?
They're just friends. They just knew each other
like,
from
let's just do
playing
this.
music and playing shows with each other and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, they all moved in. And it was just like this melting pot of amazing musicians all jamming. And there's great stories of like Questlove, who played drums on the album and also produced the album. Questlove and D'Angelo would like watch these tapes of like amazing soul, funk, jazz musicians, live performances, and they would spend like 5 hours just absorbing and watching all of this music, and then would get together and jam in the studio and start building the songs. And it's just incredible, man. The vocals are some of the best vocals I've ever heard. The harmonies are absolutely incredible. The songwriting is masterful. It's an album that I don't skip any tracks. And it's an album that I would recommend everybody like get in a dark room, light a candle, put some headphones on, and just listen to this album, and you'll be transported to another place, man. Yeah.
That's magical, bro.
It's an album that I actually only recently got into. So I probably discovered this in 2019, 2020.
Okay.
And I've listened to it almost every day since, man. Like,
holy hell.
Yeah, there's like hardly a day goes by that I don't at least put it on. I might not get through it all, but
it's there.
It's there, man. And I think regardless of like what genre of music you gravitate towards, you'll find something in this, man. If you play an instrument and you listen to this album, you'll be blown away. If you're a fan of vocals, you listen to this album, you're going to be blown away. If you love great production, it's incredibly produced. And interestingly, after this album, because of all of that sexualization of D'Angelo and him being sort of put up as like this poster boy, he went like MIA for like, I don't even know how long, like maybe five years. Like you never saw him. He didn't do any touring after that, and you just sort of never saw him again. So hearing some of the lyrics, he's talking about the situation that he's in, and it's just this mysterious, groovy, amazing piece of music that I honestly believe is one of the best pieces of music ever written, dude. Wow. So that's why it's on there for me. It had to be. And influential is another word. Like Ryan Beatty wouldn't exist without this album.
Really?
Miguel wouldn't exist without this album.
Yeah.
I know that Bruno Mars is heavily influenced by this album.
That's really cool.
Yeah, man. It's a really special piece of music that I don't think gets enough credit. So I'm happy that it is.
Well, when I checked him out on Spotify, like, I was really cool to see that he still gets like a couple of million monthly listeners.
Yeah,
still.
man. Yeah.
It's amazing.
He has a incredibly loyal fan base.
Yeah.
And
so where is he now? What's he doing now?
So he has returned. He put out another album in 2015. So it was 15 years between albums. Wow. And the album that he put out then was called Black Messiah. And it, again, it's mind-blowing, bro. Yeah, it is a masterpiece. So I hope that one day he will return and grace us with his presence again.
Good on him.
He's this enigmatic figure that just sort of randomly appears and then goes away again.
So when he dropped that 2015 album, did he do any touring or anything?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. He had a band at the time with him. Yeah. So yeah, they put on incredible shows, and if you were lucky enough to catch him, I'm incredibly jealous because it's hard to see. So yeah, man,
fantastic.
That's the end of my list.
That's amazing, man. Well, guys, that's our top albums of all time, our top 5 albums in no particular order. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed making this video, man. And we hope you guys enjoyed watching. Anything you want to share, TK, before we wrap it up?
We'd love to see your top 5. So drop your top 5 albums in the comments. If you haven't heard any of these albums and you go and check them out, let us know what you think.
Please.
And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Peace, guys.